I don't think music mastery is as far-fetched as most people make it out to seem. It is straightforward. There are only 4 core concepts that you really need to lock in on, and you will become a music master. I promise you by the end of this video, you will truly understand and know where you're lacking so that you can improve upon your weaknesses and better your strengths so that you could become the music master that you always thought you wanted to be. Music is straightforward, and it is something that I've been partaking in all of my life. As my mom was the choir director of the children's choir of the church, and I was a part of the choir in elementary school, then later joined the band in elementary school. My brother was the one who taught me how to play keyboard and guitar and bass because he was taking those private lessons, and he's older than me, so I ended up learning anything that he learned. But to get back to the topic of the fact that I've been well immersed into all aspects of music ever since I came out the womb, to the point of where I am now, being a full-time musician and a full-time music educator, teaching over 100 students every single day in the public school system how to play guitar, private lessons online, gigs almost every weekend, and I'm to the point where I feel like I've reached musical enlightenment that I just truly have to share my experiences with you. So hopefully when you hear these 4 core concepts that I am about to explain for you to be a music master, you'll truly understand it and you'll know how to improve upon your weaknesses, and you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. I understand it now. I'm sure we all know that music is as much art and expression as it is communication. Music is a language, and just like any language, there are 4 core concepts that you truly need to master in order to understand the language. Even as babies who are clueless to a language, to grow up to be literate, have understood and mastered these 4 concepts. So we are going to take the concept of learning a language and match it to the concept of the language of music. So what are the 4 core concepts to learning the language of music? First things first, you have to identify. Identification. What do I mean by that? You got to use your ears. You have to hear it, and you have to understand the certain elements that make it easier to reproduce. How fast, how slow. Anybody could recognize that. How high, how low. Anybody could recognize that. It doesn't matter if you're tone deaf. It doesn't matter if you've never really studied music before. And I'm telling you this because I teach this on a daily basis. Everybody has been groomed to understand this. Even babies look at their mom when they talk, look at their dad when they talk. And it's not just because of the depth perception of where it's coming from, even though that's a part of the identification process, is from hearing the difference in pitch. Unless your daddy got a high-pitched voice and your mama got a deep voice. Babies can recognize when certain voices are speaking. Even as a musician, you should be able to recognize when something is lower than or higher than what it needs to be. Let's say you were playing with another musician and that musician's playing an F while you're playing an E. You're going to hear the clash, you're going to hear the tension, and you're going to be able to identify that something is not right. So maybe you should be building upon your identification skills. But in order to build upon your identification skills, you have to understand the elements that you are trying to identify. So it might help to learn a little bit of theory. That way you are identifying things and categorizing it the proper way. Recognize the meter or the tempo, recognize the key, recognize the intervals, recognize the chords, recognize the chord progression, recognize the melody, recognize the form. All of those aspects will help you in the identification process, because after you identify, then you'll be able to, number 2, speak. What does speak mean when I'm talking about music? It just means play. As a musician, the instrument is an extension of your voice. Everything that makes a sentence, a phrase, a message conveyed, the emotion behind it, the pace of it, all of that is a form of expression that you may speak whenever you're telling a story, just like how I'm telling you the story about these 4 core concepts. That same thing applies to your instrument. So with the instrument being an extension of your voice, you have to understand how to identify it, but you also have to understand how to play it to the best of your ability. That means building up your technique. That way you can portray the message that you want to speak properly. That means studying those genres and understanding how certain people have done it before you. That way you can do it properly whenever it is your turn to do it. Speaking is a no-brainer. Everybody who's a musician has at least understood their craft a little bit enough to speak the language of music. For me, being a guitarist, I speak on the guitar. I feel like there is a voice to the guitar that I am often portraying every single time that I play the instrument. You will hear me play and you'll be able to recognize, oh, that's me. Just like if you hear Melanie Faye, you might be like, oh, that's Melanie Faye. You'll hear John Mayer, you'll hear B.B. King, you'll hear Jubu Smith, you'll hear any guitarist that you can name, and you can recognize their tone, recognize their voice, because the instrument is an extension of your voice. So how do you speak as a musician? How do you play as a musician? Because that is your form of speaking. In order to truly understand what you're speaking, and in order to truly identify what you're speaking, I think the best thing is to learn how to read. Oh, I might be stepping on some toes now. Everybody don't know how to read music. And there's a lot of different ways that you could read music. It depends on the medium of what you're doing, right? As a guitarist, you have tablature, but you could also try to read the staff, lead sheets. You could try to read music that wasn't even written for you. Actually, when I was studying guitar in college, my professor gave me a piano score. It literally had treble clef and bass clef on it. And he had me chart out every single note, figure out the chord, and then try to play those chords on the guitar. 4-part SATB piano voicings. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to play it. But eventually I was able to make it make sense. It wasn't the easiest thing to do right away, but it did come in handy. You cannot truly call yourself musically literate if you do not know how to read. It's as simple as that. If you're watching this video and you don't know how to read, that's something to work on. That is something that is needed to work on, which is why it is a huge aspect of music education. All music educators emphasize reading. They emphasize sight reading. They emphasize reading for the purpose of the ensemble staying on the same page, because it is used as a form of communication. Just like identification, hearing if you're too high or too low, too fast or too slow. Just like speaking, the way how you sound when you are actually playing, with the instrument being an extension of your voice. And just like the way how you read, those are the three elements which leads us to our final core concept. Right. You should know how to write music. And I don't only mean writing songs. That doesn't mean playing your 4 pop chords that you're going to play in every single song and writing lyrics like Taylor Swift. No, that means learning how to write on the staff, learning how to write down chord progressions, learning how to write using the Nashville number system, learning how to write using tablature, learning how to truly understand every element, every aspect, because they're all connected. Once you know how to read, once you know how to write, once you know how to speak, once you know how to identify, you will truly be a master at the language of music. And not just the language of music, but as a musician overall. Throughout every single opportunity that I've taken, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of different musicians. And it's just interesting seeing certain interactions that occur. I've seen musicians get fired for not knowing how to read. I've seen musicians not get a call back for not knowing how to speak a particular tone or effect throughout the instrument. And I've also seen musicians not get accepted into bands because they couldn't learn by ear. They weren't able to identify what was happening in a song because this band was not writing out the sheet music for that particular musician. So now that you know all 4 core concepts of music, what do you need help with? What are you not doing? What are you doing extremely well? Drop it in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about it. That way everybody could truly understand what the majority is doing and what the minority isn't. So, peace out, Girl Scouts. Hold it down, Cub Scouts. I'll see you in the next video.